stool fits into the height of the stool. And I want to make sure that I cover the whole expanse of the object. So I need to make sure that I know which edge is furthest to the right and which edge is furthest to the left. I'm going to take my pencil, hold it loosely between my fingertips, just bring it up next to the object. I find out that the farthest right edge of the object is right down here. I want to do that again on the left. I can anticipate where I'm headed. Yeah, farthest left edge is right here. All right, I'm going to take my pencil, hold my arm straight out, my elbow is locked. The tip of my pencil drifts up and over to the leftmost edge of the object. My thumb slides along the shaft of the pencil until it is resting basically where the right edge would be. There's a little bit of space vertically between those 2 points. I just want to make sure that I have that span really correct. I feel good about that. Without moving my thumb and without changing the length of my arm, so my elbow is still locked, I'm just going to rotate the pencil so that it's vertical. And I'm going to place my thumb right up against the very bottom of the object. This is a really clear bottom edge. If you are ever in doubt, I'll show you in a moment how to hold up a horizontal line to figure out the location of the bottom of the object. My thumb is up against the bottom of the object. I'm going to notice where the pencil point is. And in this setup, I'm actually in luck. I can tell that the pencil point is really on a level with this little background line. So at this point, I'm going to move up my thumb. It rests in the location where the pencil point was a moment ago. And now I can see that about 2/3 of the length of the pencil is still overlapping the stool, but about 1/3 of the pencil is now up above the object. This means that the width of the object fits into the overall height of the object 1 2/3 time. I'm going to take that information and make sure that my gesture reflects the same proportion. One way to ensure proportional accuracy is to write down the ratio that you found so that you don't forget it as you're drawing. So I'm going to jot down a ratio of width represented by 1, height being 1.6 times the width. As I continue to draw, I want to look for component parts. I want to start thinking about how they are proportionally related to the overall height and width of the object. A component part in this example will probably include a lot of negative space. Negative space are little openings that we find between forms of the object. The reason that the stool requires me to look for negative space is because these little components, these legs and rungs, and even the seat, those are all really, really small. And if I were to try to cite those in comparison to the overall width, I would have to count to a huge number, like 25. I don't want to do that, but I do need to figure out where these legs are placed. I do need to figure out how wide they are, and so I'm going to use these big chunks of information, these negative spaces, to understand how the object fits together. One of the things that's central to this object is the amount of angle that exists between the bottom of each rung and then the moment where it intersects the seat of the chair. This is information that I'm going to have to look at a couple of times, but by holding up a vertical line in front of the stool, or rather just to the side of this particular piece of information, I can identify what this little triangular space looks like. And then I can take that information, glance down at my drawing, and I can see, have I made my chair leg too upright? Have I made that angle too steep? Or does that angle pretty much form the exact same triangle that I'm observing as I hold it up in comparison to a vertical line. With your ruler, you can draw a vertical line on your page to represent this point of comparison that we're looking at and observing in real life. I can do that on the left side as well. You'll notice that this is not a perfectly symmetrical object. This triangle is going to be a little bit bigger, a little bit more pronounced than the one on the right was. And I can really do this as I move throughout the object. I can just continually kind of take the pulse of these delicate little pieces of information. Really thin sliver there in the back, also a pretty thin little sliver. Another way that I can use a line to help me understand the angles of this object would be to hold up a ruler in between my two fists, really. Make sure that it creates a straight line. In this instance, I'm actually still going to use the pencil. I want it to be perfectly horizontal, and I'm going to hold that line up below areas of the drawing that reveal angles moving off of a horizontal. So from the front leg to the front left leg, I can see a little angle. If I move this up like so, I can see a relationship forming in the space between this horizontal line and the placement of that back leg. I can move this up again. I can see the relationship in terms of the space between the back right leg and the back left leg. As I move up from there, I can see the angle created between the horizontal line and the front rung of the stool. For the sake of efficiency, I'm going to move up again. There's the next sort of horizontal rung that I'm looking at. And I can even move the pencil up and take a look at something like the curve of the stool seat, above, below, front rim. Those comparisons to a horizontal line or to a vertical line give me just a little bit more ability to see how my drawing is shaping up, and to create pieces of solid information, and to look for visual relationships that aren't inherent to the object as I'm observing it in real life. These angles are going to be part of how your drawing unfolds. With that in mind, I do want to go back to the idea of sighting for component parts to show you what a couple of those relationships are going to look like. So let's try sighting to understand where these rungs are located. These are really helpful to know about because they can be directly related to the very bottom edge of the object, and then they also are pretty closely related to the very top of the object. So here's how I'm going to sight this. The tip of the pencil is going to rest at the bottom of that rung. My thumb slides up until it rests on the bottom of the object. Now I'm going to take this measurement, call it 1, and figure out how many times does this measurement fit into the overall height of the stool. So 1, 2, 3, almost 4. Each time I move the pencil, I'm looking to see where's the tip of the pencil now. My thumb moves to that spot. 1, 2, 3, just about 4. That means that in my gesture drawing, I can go ahead and make a little mark here, indicating that this is the amount of negative space between these two little sort of locus points. Another thing that I can figure out now would be where does this little moment happen in comparison to the bottom of the object? Same thing, line up my thumb with the bottom of the object, pencil point, the bottom of that rung, 1, and we'll call that like 0.8. So 1 to 1.8. Another thing that I can look at to understand the component parts of the stool would be, what is the height of this whole stool seat? So not just the little face up top, but the whole object. 1 to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and a little bit of change, 8 1/3. Now, as I was discovering that information, if I was drawing instead of talking through this video, I would be making notes to myself and adjustments and little movements in the drawing each time I found a new piece of information. I would be documenting those ratios during the course of the drawing so that I didn't forget them, so that I didn't have to go back and check over and over and over again. I would be forming a record of ratios on my page, allowing me to start to piece together the drawing and to make adjustments as I'm going through all of these different sort of varied pieces of information. I'm going to show you guys a little bit of information related to width, and then I'll show you just a little bit about how this drawing would unfold. All right, let's think about width. So let's say that I understand now where this is related as far as its height, and I understand where this is related as far as its height, but I don't yet know where those are related in terms of the width of the stool. So here I'm going to line up the pencil point on that same intersection, but I'm going to go ahead and let my thumb this time line up to the right edge of the stool. All right, I have 1 to 1, 2, just a hair more than 3, really. 1, 2, 3, and just a tiny sliver of overhang. If I want to double check that, and actually if I want to find out a little bit about the width of this really delicate piece of information here, I can line my thumb up to the intersection basically of this rung right here, but this time I'm going to take my measurement starting on the left side of that front leg. I'm going to measure that against the overall width, 1 1/2, pretty clean. One more thing to look at before I call it good on this drawing. Let's look at the stool seat. So we figured out how tall that seat was in comparison to the overall height. I can now measure the width of the stool seat 2 different ways. I can measure its width by taking the span of the stool seat and comparing it against the overall width of the object. I get about 1 to 1 2/3. But because I now know how this height relates to the overall height, this information should be fixed in my drawing, which means it's stable, which means that I can use it to understand the width of the seat. So I can go 1 to 1, 2, 3, and maybe about 1/4 to 1/3. As soon as you lock in information through citing, as soon as you begin to subdivide, looking for more and more detailed pieces of information proportionally, you start to stabilize the relationships that are present. You start to build on information that you've already discovered. The fact that I had understood this height in comparison to the rest of the object is what allowed me to use it to understand the width. But it always pays to compare any new piece of information back up against something as stable as the overall width and height which you established in the beginning.